Oh man, I was an awkward kid for a long time, man. I was an awkward kid. People didn't like me, and I liked to draw, and I couldn't really go out. My first fashion week in Milan, I had no money. What do I do in the meantime? I have bills, I have the phone, I have food, like I have to walk around, I have to get to other castings and stuff like that. So, and that was for years, like.
Adonis,
Hey man.
thank you very much for giving us this minute to get to sit down with you.
It's an honor for you to have me, man.
Thank you. The goal of this conversation is really to, I think people look at, especially now with social media and Instagram and just the way people see things in general, they kind of look at the trajectory of people and just assume that things happen overnight. So the goal of this conversation is just to basically have a chat, to understand who you are, where you're going, what you've been through. Not saying you have been through things, but just to understand the mindset of Adonis, right?
Definitely.
So it's a very simple conversation. There's no right and wrong.
I like that.
Dialogue, really.
Yeah.
So you're from Ivory Coast.
Yeah, I was born in Abidjan, and when I was about 3, I got really, really sick, and my parents, they decided to leave. They left. My dad had a pretty successful business back home, and my mom was enjoying being a mother, and she was really helping little businesses around the city and everything. And then I got really sick, and my parents decided to just leave everything, and they went to Canada, and they started a new life, and I got better once we got over there, and I got the right treatment and everything. So they sacrificed their whole life so I could be here. So I had to do greatness, or at least try, you know, and yeah.
How do you think Ivory Coast and your experience being in Ivory Coast molded and shaped you to the man you are today?
Well, French is my first language, and it's funny. I had a conversation with somebody yesterday, and he said that somebody told him that French was their first language, and he thought that was cool. But then they realized that. Then the person told them back that French is my first language, but it wasn't by choice. See, there's people that came to my country and gave me that language by force, you know. And yeah, it's a great thing. I was able to have French to travel around the world, but this culture that was still kept within this French language that I have inherited from Ivory Coast it's a part of me. And growing up in Canada and America and just in society in general, being an African child back in the 90s, for example, back in the 90s, the image of being African was never positive. I grew up watching kids on TV, with little kids on TV with flies on their face and everything. And they kind of limited my mind on what I can do, as thinking, oh, because I'm African, there's only a certain limit, there's a limited amount of things that I'm allowed to do in life, you know? And I don't know, all these images really impacted my childhood and my life, but still I had in front of me day to day so many positive images of these African people. My mom and my dad they're my heroes, they're my inspiration, they're why I do everything. They've taught me so much about life and love all together, you know, so I just owe that to them. And they're Africans. They were born there, they have their roots, they studied there, and then they left their country for me. So being from the Ivory Coast is all of me, no matter how long I leave the country or how often how often I go back, it's always a part of me. I always represent it in everywhere I go, you know.
How did you adapt to coming from Africa and landing up in Canada?
It was crazy. My parents were really smart. I remember, because I spoke French, and when you get to Montreal, Montreal is bilingual, so it speaks people speak French and English. Well, if you want to get a good job, you got to speak French and English. And my parents got me to Canada. We're speaking French and blah blah blah, and they threw me in an English kindergarten. So I remember like going to kindergarten. I was like, "What the hell are these people saying?" It's like it's still so vivid in my mind. And I remember there was this one little girl that spoke French. She was trying to like help me, and I was kind of not having it. I was like, okay, but afterwards, like it helped because I speak English now, and I've been speaking English since I was 3. But in Canada, like you're allowed to keep your culture compared to like here in America. I feel like there's this sense of assimilation of like the American culture that you have here more that is less opposed upon you in Canada. Like I grew up in Côte d'Ivoire. In Côte d'Ivoire, like I grew up in Uptown. There was Filipinos, Jamaicans, Africans. We all grew together, and we all had our community within like the neighborhood, you know. So there was never like this need. There was we had the Vietnamese store behind us that had every like African little thing that you needed, from the plantains to the little spices. So everybody really lived in a sense of community in Canada that's a little different. And yeah, there's like a lot of stereotypes I never heard until I got here in America, you know. So it was easier compared to like if I was here, I must admit.
From what I understand, being ill, you spend a lot of time by yourself. Then moving from an environment to Canada, you have to, adapt to learn the language so you can really communicate with people. How did you integrate socially?
Man, I was an awkward kid for a long time, man. I was an awkward kid. People didn't like me, and I liked to draw, and I couldn't really go out because my parents, my mom was very protective, and like she almost lost me, and I was sick, so she was very protective, and she didn't really like me to be too far away from her. So I usually found ways to like stay creative by my own. So I would draw a lot, I would make up stories, I would sing around the house, and blah, blah, blah. And yeah, I was never into sports because like I couldn't really play with the other kids as much. So like, I remember like one of the earliest apartments we had was at the very top floor, and there was the balcony, and I could overlook on the backyard, and like the kids were playing. I was like, look at these kids like playing sports and stuff. Look at them. But then it wasn't until like maybe high school that I kind of like got cool. I think like I was like an awkward kid for a long time, and then high school happened, and then there was like I started experiencing my creativity all over, from dancing to singing and like doing drama and stuff like that. So that's when I really like started to bloom as a person, as an individual overall, and yeah, it was not so much about from who I was and where I was from. It was just trying to fit in and grow, My first fashion week in Milan, I had no money, and I was like, I had to walk to every casting, and I had like 10 castings every day, and I had to like walk. I had to like